Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio program, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is yet another expression of that battle between love and fear. We call this one greed and generosity.
I'm looking forward to doing this program because I believe that these concepts, especially greed, because that's the problem, generosity being the solution in many ways, is on the minds of a lot of folks. We have what appears to be very fearful times, and when people are frightened, they tend to behave in negative ways, and maybe a lot of their natural generosity is giving way to an even more natural or fundamental fear, and expressed as greed. One of the things I believe greed comes out of, besides fear, is a belief that we live in a you or me world rather than a you and me world. And much is made, even in economics, of the nature of self-interest. Well, this series is called Finding Yourself in Paradise, and we believe there's at least two poles, or if not two parts to the self, or even two completely different selves, depending on which model you like. A greedy self and a generous self. A part of us that believes that self-interest involves only the individual that's interested in their separated self, but maybe there's a higher self that sees itself as unavoidably a part of the community, and so self-interest is what can I do for you, because we all benefit from the greater good.
At some point, there may be a value to being a little greedy. Like if you give everything away and everybody else keeps everything, then you don't have anything. We do need to survive. We need to make sure that a certain amount of the survival needs we keep. And so it may be, a basic survival to hoard, to hold close to grab a hold of stuff and to want to keep a little extra, to have a little put away for a rainy day. But greed has grown beyond the I need everything for my survival and a little bit more, to the point where some people are in a place where they have so much more than they could ever use, and yet the goal seems to be to continue to get more. That's when the big problem is. Greed, when you have way more than you need and you need more. If we take a look at all the people in the world and say the richest people are the number one and the poorest people are number 10, then the problem is that the ones want to get even richer rather than to help the tens become a little less poor. It would be wonderful if the most wealthy of us were to help the poorest of us. And, there are some great role models for that today. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and a few others are really being very, very philanthropic, very, very generous with their money.
And I think that does benefit them. Again, they see that higher self. How do you buy the feeling of giving to somebody else? I mean, it's sort of a bizarre thing, because you're swapping a material money for something that's non-material or even spiritual, which is this warm fuzzy you get from being generous and kind. Money can't buy love, is what they say. I think Helen Keller, there's so many great quotes about this. She said, the things in life that are really valuable cannot be seen or touched. They have to be felt with the heart. Yeah, so when you talk about a little bit of greed is good, I think we're arguing the semantics now. Really, the definition of greed is where self-interest goes beyond self-interest. Like, to be interested in yourself is healthy.
Right, and to have a little put away for a rainy day, that's a wise idea.
Smart.
It's okay to have a little more than you need.
Sure. And I think that we've all been trained to put ourselves second. One of the greatest points of resistance in the whole human potential and personal development field is this codependence of, I don't want to hurt them. I'm afraid that this will have a negative impact on them. I don't want to make them feel bad, that kind of thing. Even if it comes to hurting yourself or some sort of self-betrayal, we'll often put other people first to such an extraordinary degree that everybody gets hurt. Nobody really benefits from codependence in a situation like that. Children, as we've discussed in past programs, are naturally dependent. And so codependence is a part of every child's life, but we're supposed to outgrow it. And in the personal development movement, a lot of people get confused about this, and they don't want to put themselves first. They don't want to take care of themselves. They don't want emotional and mental independence because it looks to them or feels to them like selfishness. And I don't want to be selfish, and I sure don't want to be perceived as selfish. But you know, the most charitable and philanthropic people in the world are putting themselves first. You have to take care of number one if you want to be of any value to everybody else in your life. So, yeah, selfish people put themselves first and then do selfish things. Generous people put themselves first and then do kind and generous things.
It really comes down to a perception of scarcity and abundance. You know, if you see the world as being very scarce, there's not enough resources. Animals living in a terrain where there's barely enough food, they hoard, they gather, and they need to put some away for the winter, or they find a way to make sure the other animals don't steal the food that they need because there's a limited amount of resource. If their same animals are living in a place where food is overabundant, then they don't have to have that particular behavior. So the perception that there's not enough is what causes people to be greedy. That I might lose it all. Somebody might come and take it away from me. I need more, more, because there's just never enough because the world is full of there's not enough. But if you have a sensation of abundance, you know, you just feel like, well, there's plenty. There's more than enough to go around, and I don't really, you know, I don't need that much. I just need what I need and a little bit more. Then I don't want to be conspicuous in my over, you know, consumption of things. I just want to have nice stuff. Then there's plenty for that to happen. With that kind of feeling, then we feel safe. We're out of the fear that there's not enough, and we feel safe that there's plenty. And that feeling of plenty, I think, lends us toward trying this thing called generosity, trying this thing called philanthropic endeavors, trying this thing called helping others. And all of a sudden we realize, wow, that feels good. Like it feels better than anything except for being in love in the whole wide world, helping others, being philanthropic, being charitable, being generous. So we feel safe enough to like know that we have enough and there's plenty more out there, so we can avail ourselves of this wonderful feeling of giving of ours to others.
I think it's interesting, fascinating, even watching this in the animal kingdom. I was just thinking of all the dogs that I have owned, cared for, and otherwise known in my life. And only one, you probably remember him, Stanley.
Oh, indeed.
Big white shepherd lab mix, strongest dog I ever met in my life. He's the only dog I ever knew that actually buried bones, right? He, for whatever reason, was a little insecure and thought, oh boy, I'm going to take this delicious bone and put it in the ground and cover it with dirt. He didn't mind digging it up later. He'd, lick the dirt off it and go ahead and enjoy himself. But, that's an animal instinct. That wasn't him reasoning out anything. He didn't know why he was burying the bone. He knew enough to remember where it was. He had a real good sniffer, and he certainly would find the bone. And in our cats, I've seen the two cats that know each other best, that have lived together all of their lives. They'll eat food out of the same bowl. They'll share. But the third cat that we rescued out of the forest, it doesn't have that trust yet. It's got to have its own bowl, or it freaks out if one of the other cats comes over, or you'll even see the hackles go up and the claws and the whole thing. To see that in animals is one thing. To know that animals can learn to trust and get beyond that is another. But then to see humans behaving like frightened animals, that's really sad. And then to consider that a big part of corporate America, Wall Street, the bankers, our government, and people who seek power are coming out of fear. I think that's a great challenge for people. To see the rich and the powerful as, in many ways, frightened people, at least not all rich and powerful, but those who behave in evil, greedy ways. I mean, they say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Why is that? Look at the scandal that's unfolding now in the summer of 2011 with the biggest media empire in the world, Murdoch's empire, Fox News here, and whatever are these tabloids he owns in England, and all that's coming about with the phone hacking. It seems so evil on the surface. And yet I'm wondering, what are the motives? Selling newspapers? Wanting to be better than the competition? Are these people all evil people? I don't think so. But could they be frightened? Could they be acting out of fear and just afraid they're going to lose their jobs if they don't get a leg up and tap somebody's phone? These are things certainly that we want to consider, to observe in the behavior of other people, but more importantly, to find within ourselves. What corrodes our behavior? What is it that causes us to become selfish and even greedy? It's fear by any name. We could call it stress or anxiety or worry or doubt, nervousness, apprehension, but I think it's the F word. I think it comes down to fear and its primary relationship with ignorance and confusion.
One of the things that has happened in corporate America, and that's not much different than around much of the rest of the world. There are places where it's not so true. Capitalism isn't rampant everywhere, but in the places where capitalism has taken over, an interesting phenomenon has occurred, and that is that corporations have taken on human-like qualities. They're considered to be people, and they're like entities. And so the people that run these corporations understand that the corporation's lifeblood is not technically blood, it's money. And there's a bunch of parasites called the stockholders that need their blood. They need their money. And so it's not about I'm being greedy. It's about this corporation has to get bigger and bigger and bigger to feed these parasites that have bought part of it. And so we've been able to rationalize. Humans are not rational creatures. Mark Twain said they're rationalizing creatures. We've been able to rationalize that it's okay to steal jobs from all these people and give all those jobs to people who are willing to work for $1 a day. We've been willing to rationalize that because we've got to feed this machine. We've got to feed this corporate entity that doesn't, it's not greedy, it's just needing to survive. And if it doesn't grow, it dies. It can't just stay the same, it's got to grow or die. So we've created this perception of reality that is not real, that these corporations are entities that need to continue to suck money in whatever way possible. There are wonderful corporations that consider that taking care of people is one of the bottom lines they're looking for, but those corporations where it's all about making money, it's not even an issue of the CEO being greedy. It's just an issue of giving up their humanity to this entity that sucks money. It's really quite remarkable the way we've done that.
I think it's a very good point. And the issue here is just that it takes a really enlightened woman or man or group or team to lead a company in this enlightened way. There are many examples of businesses that have kept their labor costs down and prevented unions from coming in by being generous. It's just a really smart thing to do. By listening to the employees, now there's a crazy idea, by solving problems with what sometimes is called listening down, right? Or 360 degrees of responsibility.
That's a more common name these days for it.
Yeah. I don't like listening down, but it's sort of demeaning, but I understand what it comes from. And the idea, if a worker feels that he or she has input in a situation, if that gets acknowledged, if the boss just says, I'm really interested in what you think and how you feel as well as your performance, wow, that's real leadership. They always say criticize privately and congratulate publicly. That, too, I think that's the one-minute manager stuff. That's really smart. But
instant generosity.
if you don't have really enlightened, conscious people who are in touch with these principles on your board, in your executive team, then the way to keep a union away is with threats and intimidation and dividing the labor force. I did some pretty horrible menial labor jobs working my way through college. I was in a die-cast plant one summer. I actually worked in an auto foundry. My God, talk about being motivated to stay in school. A summer in a foundry certainly did that. But the way racism was used, and sometimes even sexism, to divide the workers so we couldn't get together and we'd be competing against each other sometimes. It creates an appearance, perhaps, of boosting performance, but in the long run, it doesn't do anything but degrade performance and morale. It creates sabotage and disloyalty and all kinds of problems that most managers cannot handle. There are people that know this. There are business schools that are teaching this. It goes beyond just ethics. It's just really smart leadership. But it's like, how do you teach consciousness? You can work with intelligent people. How do you go beyond intelligence to the big picture? How do you get people out of fear into a state where they're safe enough and relaxed enough, like the kittens, to eat from the same bowl, to trust each other, labor and management? That left and right, that either or, aren't you getting really tired of that? Wouldn't you like some and? Even if it's not even, not 50-50, a little, could be 60-40 and. It could be 90 and 10, and the 90 actually respects the 10. Can you imagine, right? Well, I know I'm right. Well, how about granting that other person who disagrees, who you've been calling wrong, just a little bit of right, okay? It's not that hard to do, and everybody benefits.
In a marriage, if you're taking a look at, like, well, I want to make sure I get my half of the things and, that she doesn't get any more than half, then if you're unwilling to be generous, if you need to be greedy, so to speak, make sure, watch and make sure that you're getting that bigger piece of pie, or at least the equal size piece of pie. If you're in that mode, you're in a place of fear. You're in a place of scarcity. And I think that's really one of the greatest indicators that this marriage is not going to work. If you're being greedy with your partner in the marriage, if you're in a place where it's more important to you that you get as much or more than they do, rather than being generous, and it being really okay if they get the bigger piece of pie. It's really, really okay. In fact, it feels wonderful to see that they get the bigger piece of pie.
That's like winning the battle but losing the war.
Yeah, right? Isn't it wonderful?
What have you really won if, you create all this disharmony?
That's exactly right. So the great place to start practicing generosity is in your marriage, in your closest relationships, like needing less, giving more. What was that wonderful line from the Moody Blues? Give just a little bit more and take a little bit less from each other tonight. What a wonderful concept. Just give a little bit more and take a little bit less. Be a little more generous and a little less greedy. Maybe you can't do that everywhere in the world. Maybe it's not safe to do that in your business, or it may not be safe to do that in some of these organizations you're part of. But hopefully there's a place it is safe to do it. Maybe it's with your kid, or maybe it's with your parent, or maybe it's with your spouse. But find a place to start practicing generosity. The practical aspect of this show today, greed and generosity, is how to be a little less greedy and a little more generous. Well, one of the great places to start is being a little more generous. It's easier to be a little more generous than to be a little less greedy. It's easier to express a little more love than to release a little more fear. Not that you can't release fear. You absolutely can, but it's so much easier to expand your love first and feel wonderful about yourself. Be a little more generous, and then after a little while of doing that, you'll feel so good about yourself. It'll be easy to take a look at those parts of you that are a little greedy, feel a little safer, and maybe let them go.
This either-or mentality, this binary black or white, everything or nothing, it's part of the natural duality of living in the material world. And every philosophy, even many religions, talk about the appearance of duality, and that spirit is actually a non-dual thing. There is no duality in the spiritual level. Love doesn't separate. Fear separates. Love unites. And that's a theme in all kinds of literature, screenplays, and movies as well. It's such an important principle. I mean, if we take the tendency to see things as right or wrong, good or bad, winners or losers, us or them. Let's just take us or them. Either you're with us or against us, is what our president said after 9/11. Well, that's not true. That's just absolutely not true. But when you're in danger, that's the way people think. So I can understand that that would be his appeal at the time. It's a great way to motivate people. Fear. Many parents use fear, and it works in the short term. There's a horrible price to pay in the long term. The child grows up with a lot of resentment that he was parented or she was parented by fear rather than love and vision. It's just, it works and it's easy. Love and vision works, but it's much more challenging. It's much more difficult. You have to really feel safe to look at the third way, the middle. Think of the people you know as either with you or against you. And it won't take long for you to realize the need for a middle. Well, this person is definitely on my side. This person I would never trust. They don't like me and I don't like them. But the majority of people are somewhere in the middle. Most of them don't even care. It's like, hey, I need a third category. Yeah. And then if you overlay on top of right or wrong, good or bad, winners and losers, how about everything or nothing? Now it gets really perverse. That means if you're not with me, you must be against me. If you don't agree with me 100% of the time in every possible way, you are opposed. You are not only different, you are opposite. Imagine, anything that's different is opposite, and therefore a threat to you just because it's different in the tiniest little way. Steve talked about marriage, a couple who agrees 98% of the time, but there's 2% where they disagree. That means they're not on your team because they don't agree with you in this little area over here. They're a threat to you. There's an understanding in psychology, you only hate the people you love, right? O.J. must have loved his wife very much to kill her. If he didn't love her, he wouldn't have cared. If she lived down the block and he didn't even know her, it wouldn't matter if she was going out with Ron Goldman, It's bizarre to think of differences as opposites, and yet it's part of the fight or flight response. It's part of the way we've survived to see things when we're in danger, real or imagined, to think it's either this way or that way. Imagine all multiple choice exams being true or false. You don't get some of the above or none of the above or all of the above or find the best right answer. It's just everything true or false. Well, that would be absurd in a school system. It's even more absurd to live your life that way.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of seeing your life as everything or nothing is like a psychotic break with reality. Like the fact is that it's almost zero everything and almost zero nothing. It's almost all in the middle. It's all shades of rainbow colors and stuff. But we can, start to become more generous. And that's a great place to start by realizing it's not all bad. In fact, some of it's real good. I think that, in fact, might be the very place to start. The way to become more generous is to feel safe, to let go of the fear, and to feel abundant, to feel like there's plenty. So, to me, the first step in becoming generous is to acknowledge inside yourself that how much you have. I mean, how overflowing your providence is. A bevy of blessings that count your blessings. Sit back and think of what is there to be grateful for? What is wonderful in the world? What is wonderful in my life? Start to think about how full and rich and fulfilling some of the experiences you've had and some of the people you know and some of the things you do, and start to be grateful for that. And then all of a sudden there's this feeling of, wow, there's lots, there's plenty, there's an abundance. And then with that comes almost this urge for generosity, almost this outpouring of compassion and empathy and love. And it's like I've got so much. I'm bursting. I just want to share it with somebody. I feel so good. I just want to be with somebody and give to somebody and help somebody and do something nice for somebody. it's wonderful to have a vision of being less greedy. That's a wonderful place, but I don't think that's where we start, because I think we need to become more generous and get the juices flowing, and then we can start to look at that place that's really kind of scary to look at. Why are we greedy? What is really deep down are we afraid of? Where were we when that experience happened that made us feel like there wasn't enough love in the world? Like what was it that did that thing to us when we were really little that made us feel like I'm not willing to share the same bowl? I'm not, like something happened to everybody, virtually everybody, somewhere along the way. One or many, many, many things happened that caused this fear thing to happen inside of us, caused this need for believing in scarcity. It wasn't abundant. It wasn't for sure going to be there. And then so all of a sudden I had to hoard. I sort of had to hold on to stuff, and I'm scared, so I'm not sure it's going to be there next. And I think we need to explore that inside ourselves and find really at the core what childhood injury, what childhood experience really hurt, but that's not the place to begin. That's like, you don't start with physics, you start with arithmetic. The place to begin is getting the cycle going and flowing with more generosity. And once you feel that good about yourself, then with that to balance, you can start to look at the parts that hurt a lot.
Another part of this, when we talk about generosity, the solution or resolution to the problem of greed and fear, is that there's more than money you can be generous with. I, like everybody else, get these phone calls. Even my university, which is a state-supported land-grant school, Michigan State, they call me because they've got me on a list somehow, and they want me to send them money. And it seems to me their time and energies would be better spent lobbying in Lansing and Washington for the money they deserve from the government. But if alums want to donate money to the school, that's fine. But I look around at the levels of poverty in the world, of hunger and homelessness, and the need that abused children and women and others have. It's just the need is so great. And you look at your bank account and you may say, I don't think I can really help. I wish I knew what I could do. Well, I'd suggest that what you can do is open your vision a little bit and consider alternatives to money, like time and energy. Maybe you could write letters. Maybe you could, it may be as simple as reposting something on Facebook.
I just yesterday, just because I felt like it, maybe it was because I was thinking about this show, but I just felt like it. Two old friends of mine from like 30 years ago that I used to work with, Nancy and Arlene, both of them. I just Facebooked them saying, I was just thinking about you, and I just wanted to let you know how much the contributions you made to my life mean to me even now 30 years later. And that's being generous. Not that it didn't make me feel better. It didn't diminish me in any way. Being generous doesn't diminish you in any way. But it felt so good to do that. And I know how they must have enjoyed, hearing from me after, all this time and in such a loving and caring way. You can be generous without money. In fact, it seems to me that a real rich person who says, take 5% and give it to this charity and don't bother me with it anymore. They're giving money. That's not really generous. That's not like the heartfelt generosity. I'm talking about giving time, giving energy, giving love, giving care. Perhaps the most generous thing we humans can do is listen to each other. Give other person our time and our attention and our care. And that's very, very generous sometimes.
You've nailed it. In fact, there are references, admonitions in the Bible about this very thing. That the woman who was poor, old, impoverished, virtually no income, who gives just a pence is so much more generous than the rich man that gives a large amount. But in terms of percentages, he doesn't even feel it. To look at the billionaires now that are fighting over, I could save $80,000 on my taxes. Well, this is somebody that made $20 million last year. The average CEO salary in America now is $10 million a year. And so to save $100,000, that's 1% of their income. It's like nothing, right? What do you do with 1% of your income? And so, sure, it's a lot of money in these arguments. I understand there's merit on all sides of the argument. I'm, again, the one that promotes relative truth, and every argument, every position has some degree of merit. So I'm the first to admit that. And, you know, another admonition that we see in holy books, not only in Christianity but all religions, is don't make a big public display out of your generosity. If you go and tell everybody, or you give alms in the public square so that everybody sees what a generous person you are, well, that's not generosity. That's a purchase. You're buying something there. And so you might as well save your money. Do it secretly.
Yeah, although I have no problem with somebody putting up $10 million and having their name on a hospital wing. You know, I mean,
I do.
I
do.
I don't have a problem.
I really do.
I'd much rather they put up the $10 million and have their name there than not put up the $10 million.
I would agree. If those are the only two,
well,
we're back to either or, though.
Yeah, it's not either or, but I don't have a problem with that.
There was a fellow in L.A. that's done that. I just saw a 60 Minutes episode about this guy. You know, for all the buildings that have his name on it, I should know who he is. But he's a fabulously wealthy guy, gives a lot of money, but every place has to have his name on the hospital wing or the... And again, you know what it brings up for me? I respect your position on this, but what it brings up for me is monarchy. The idea that some people really are better than others. And we live in a country that was founded on the principle that everybody's equal. All men are created equal. What you make of your life after that.
We don't end up the same.
But, you know, a fabulously wealthy person didn't generate all that money. In some cases they do, obviously. They earn it. But in many cases they don't. You know, it's a matter of fortune or circumstance or leverage or a willingness to be unethical or... It's like monarchy. It's not their money that they earned that build these fabulous palaces. And the argument was, well, if they didn't tax the poor and use that money, there would be no beautiful palaces. Or if they hadn't commissioned the artist to do this beautiful painting, we would have no beautiful paintings or classical music. And therefore, monarchy is a good thing. I don't buy the argument. It's like, oh, the fallout from the Pentagon budget was Tang. We discovered Tang. If it hadn't been for going to the moon, we'd all have to drink orange juice. I'm not buying that. That's really not all their money, especially like these hedge fund managers. It's pretty clear to me that the harder you work, the less money you make. That the people that make the most money do the least work.
That depends on how you define work.
Yeah.
I mean, because the people who make the most money probably put in 80-hour weeks.
Not really. You look at the studies and you'll see that the most stress is found in the workers who work the hardest, whether it's manual labor or mental labor at a desk or whatever. And executives have the least stress because they delegate. They're at lunch. They're having a 3-martini lunch.
They have the less stress because they don't have survival issues. They have next month's bills paid. They aren't living paycheck to paycheck. They have less stress because they tell people what to do and they're not told what to do. They have less stress for a lot of reasons, but it's not because they're not working hard.
I'm just saying it's not their money.
Yeah.
You've got an economic system that is based on gambling, and the game is rigged, just like Las Vegas. You know, if your idea of retirement is winning the lottery or taking your money to Vegas, anybody would say that's not a good idea.
Well, the stock market's not that different than that.
Exactly. Yeah. So where's your 401k?
But, yeah, wise people, of course, diversify and put their money into lots of things besides the stock market.
Yeah,
but not putting any into the stock market these days doesn't make sense either. So.
No. What else are you going to do? You can't put it in a can, under the bed or stuff the mattress.
You can have a certain amount in real estate and a certain amount in bonds and a certain amount in other things, but, at some point.
Now they're coming after that, too. Even Social Security they want.
Inflation kills everything except real estate, so who knows?
So I think it goes beyond just simple generosity and greed. I think there's a mindset here about capitalism. I love free enterprise. I've been an enterprising, self-employed individual for most of my life. I really believe in the laws of the marketplace and Keynesian economies and supply and demand and all of that. But in the monopoly system, where there's cartels, where a whole industry is controlled by 5 oil companies.
Monolithic capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. That's the word for it. Now everything's out of whack and out of kilter.
Yeah.
I mean, gasoline was $5 a gallon until the 5 oil executives were pulled before Congress, and a week later it had fallen 80 cents a gallon.
What a coincidence.
The same gas you were you were paying $5 for now is only $4.20. Out here anyway, on the mainland, it went down to $3.25 or whatever. And so the game's rigged, and that's the greed, I think, that upsets people. The people that seem to have the most are not satiated or satisfied. Because it's really, I think, not about the money. It's about an illusion of power. And this is where I say, Frodo, would you get rid of this ring? Right? To me, that's what the power of the ring is all about. It's materialism and the belief that money and stuff will make you happy. Money and stuff can do a lot of things for us. I'm in favor of money and stuff.
Yeah, because no money and no stuff does make you unhappy.
It's horrible, yeah.
But once you have enough and a little bit more, a lot more doesn't make any difference at all.
That's exactly right. And yet, who are the greediest people? The people that already have the most. I mean, you don't have to have a lot of psychology in your education or your background to say that's perverse. That the greediest person is the millionaire, and here's a totally poor person sharing a sandwich with somebody else that's poor.
The millionaire would say, of course, they're sharing. That's why they don't get to be the millionaire.
If they do, that's really perverse. Yeah. This, I think, is more than just a program we're doing on fear and love or on greed and generosity. This is right at the core of the human dilemma. This is a lesson that humanity's going to have to learn.
Yeah, safe people share and unsafe people like hoard. It's pretty simple.
We have to live in a material world. We have to deal with money and stuff. We have to master that. No question about it. No escape. But there's more than money and stuff. I think that's all I'm saying. And increasingly, people are beginning to get that. So they are kinder. They are becoming more generous, especially the young people. And I don't think we have to overthrow anything. I'm not calling for a revolution, but an accelerated evolution of a natural process where people say, oh, I see, in addition to the money and stuff, which will solve a lot of these problems, there are these affairs of the heart. There are these psychological, or you might even say spiritual affairs. And generosity, I think, is part of that.
Yeah, I think we're looking in an evolution where the wealthier you get, the more generous you get. And for the first time, we're seeing the wealthiest people in the world becoming the world's greatest philanthropists. And I think that's absolutely exciting and wonderful. And so the safer we feel, the more we have above what we need and a little bit more. I think everybody deserves to have what they need and a little bit more. That's a huge variable, of course. Some people could do that on $20,000 a year, and some people need $200,000 a year. And I suppose there are even people who need $2 million a year to be able to do that. But I don't think there's anybody who needs $200 million a year to be able to do that. There is a number. There is a point at which you couldn't possibly spend that kind of money. And the people that get into that kind of range, the top 0.01% of the population, they're billionaires, literally now billionaires. They couldn't possibly spend that money in 10 lifetimes. Then those are the people that we have to look toward to become more philanthropic and more generous. And I really am grateful to the Gateses and the Buffetts and the others, the Ted Turners, that are being generous and being philanthropic and starting to give. But almost everybody in the middle class or upper middle class or upper class in the United States is in a place where we have way more than most people in the world do. The United States is pretty greedy as a civilization in terms of using up the world's resources. We use much more than almost any other part of the world does. And so I think in the United States, it's incumbent upon us to be more generous, maybe because we have more than other people. And so we fall prey to a lot of schemes that call for us to give money, like the Nigerian email things. But, some of those things, like you see on TV where they're helping children in other countries that are, have problems or are deformed or whatever. Americans are very generous in that way. We are very loving and very giving and very compassionate and very caring. And a lot of us recognize that charity is a wonderful thing, and it's in our self-interest to be charitable. And I don't know that there's another civilization in the world that's probably more charitable than the United States, but I call for us to become more so and more generous with our time, more generous with our energy, more generous with our listening skills. Give just a little bit more and take a little bit less from each other. I think that's just a wonderful credo.
Confucius and Moses both get credit in different hemispheres, different parts of the world, for coming up with this idea called the Golden Rule and treating other people the way you'd like to be treated. A variation on that is love your neighbor. The question is not how do I love? The question is who is my neighbor? How far down the block am I supposed to go? Well, all around the world, to the exclusion of no one. Every human being is your neighbor. Indeed, why stop there? How about every animal and every plant? How about the mineral kingdom? We're blowing the top off mountains and silting streams and continuing to extinct wildlife, plants, and animals for, really greedy reasons, and doing it unnecessarily. So, again, I think at the root of all of this, it's as simple as saying, we are transitioning from a you or me world, evolving out of the jungle, out of survival, and growing into a you and me world. Now, what that means and how we do that, what you and I can do to accelerate that natural evolution, these are all great questions. And the place, I think, to turn those questions over in your mind to reflect is paradise, the alpha brainwave level. So let's do an audio journey. If this is a good time for you, sit back now and relax and take a couple of nice, slow, deep breaths. We probably got you all excited and worked up here.
Well, those deep breaths just let the brain know that everything is okay.
That's what you're doing. You're communicating with the brain. It thought you were in danger. It thought there was somebody out there called them. Take a couple of more slow, deep breaths and consider the possibility that there's nobody here called them. That, like my kitties, you can share from the bowl. One planet, one people. One mind, one heart. How we work that out, we're going to need a lot of good ideas. But let's just reflect upon, as you become relaxed, feeling even safer now, and allow your breathing to find a nice, even, natural rhythm. Going deeper, feeling even more relaxed. Just ask yourself, how does it feel in my body to consider that there's no one here who's not one of us?
And with every breath that you release, your mind and body feel more at peace. And you find that you feel the union. You find that you feel whole. You find within this reunion that you are all part of the same soul. All connected, all one, all part of the is. And with that recognition comes a wonderful bliss and an awareness of the abundance. It's all here to share. Everything you see, hear, smell in the air, it's all yours too. There's so much in you that you feel safe and free to begin to imagine brand new ways to express your generosity. Start thinking of ways that you can give of your time and energy to those people around that deserve your generosity. And imagine, in being generous, just how wonderful that feels, and how the experience of being generous is a two-way thing that heals. It heals the person you're generous with. It heals you, too. It's a wonderful thing to be generous, to imagine and to follow through. So feel safe and feel abundant. Feel like there's plenty. And what's more, there's just this urge to be a little more generous, to share all that you store, to give away some of your concentration, some of your attention, some of your listening and ability to just be. Be generous with your time, your money, and your energy. It feels wonderful. And your generosity sets you free.
Imagine yourself in outer space, but not that far from Earth. Imagine that as you're floating in space, Earth appears to be about the size of a basketball, floating there against a beautiful black, starry backdrop. This beautiful blue marble, the oceans, the white clouds. And though maybe you can't see them, you remember the green forests, the jungles, the grasses and the flowers, and the myriad of beautiful animals, creatures of all types and sizes that share this planet with humanity. And imagine opening your arms and embracing the entire planet as if it were one whole thing, deserving of your love. And even when elements of this one thing misbehave, you comfort like a child after a bad dream or a nightmare. You embrace and comfort and acknowledge the dream, but reassure the frightened child that everything is really going to be okay. And feel how it feels to love the world as if it were whole. And imagine drawing that globe right into your heart, as if you too are being healed and made whole.
So take the time and explore your mind and count the blessings that you've received. And you will see just how much you've benefited from others' generosity. And in counting your blessings and acknowledging how much you have received, you begin to understand, in fact, change the way you believed, that there is enough. In fact, there's plenty. In fact, there's even more. And you feel safe to be more generous and less greedy and more. What you find in by being more generous and less greedy is you feel better about you. It just changes the way you do what you do. So feel safe, and therefore less need for greed and more ability to give it away. You can do it even anonymously. You don't even have to say. Just feel the feeling that comes in giving. And what you will find is not only does it heal your heart, but it also heals your mind.
So bring this feeling with you back into the room. As you inhale through the nose, filling your lungs, hold as you peak for just a moment, and as you exhale, open your eyes, wide awake, alert, back in the room, feeling really great, all energized and better than before.
And for those of you who are thinking, I can't be generous, I don't have any money, I just say 2 words to you. Mother Teresa. You know, you don't really have to have money to be generous. You can be generous with your time, generous with your energy, generous with your ability to listen and care. You know, generosity is really something that comes from your heart you get to share. It's a wonderful feeling.
Write a letter, send an email to somebody. Do you know that when you do that, the person that receives it, unless they're as dumb as mud, they know that represents at least 1,000 people who feel the same way but didn't bother to write. So one little email, and you're speaking for 1,000 people who feel the same way.
Because companies and politicians sort of look at it like 1,000 to 1.
Yep,
huh?
that was even going to say, whether it's a politician or a corporation or whatever group or organization.
Yeah, I don't think my friends would think that. There must be 1,000 Steves out there who feel that way, but I get corporations with.
And again, it doesn't have to be a complaint. It could be, as Steve did, a very nice thing, a compliment. It goes a long way. So give it some thought. I think you'll understand the importance of this, that really greed comes from fear. Generosity comes from love and feeling safe. There is no fear. And there's a general growth in humanity moving from fear to love, from greed and the separative self toward generosity and the higher self that is harmonious and more inclusive. And you're still part of the greater good. Remember, it's not a big sacrifice to serve the community. It's not instead of you. It's like in addition to you. You're part of that greater good.
And I just want to reiterate what a wonderful role model it is for the wealthiest of us to become the most generous of us.
Indeed.
I think that's such a great role model.
Indeed, in whatever way possible. Hey, thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you next week as we continue our Finding Yourself in Paradise Personal Empowerment series. Thanks for being with us. Be sure and tell your friends, and as always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.